Hello and welcome to the High Potential Startups interview series. I'm your host, Nick Taylor, and this podcast is sponsored by Octopus Ventures, one of Europe's largest and most active VCs with over £1 billion under management and a portfolio of more than 100 companies. Their investment team specializes in 5 areas: health, fintech, deep tech, consumer, and business-to-business software. The health team in particular is looking to back entrepreneurs who are transforming the health industry, from digital therapeutics to biotech at seed, Series A and Series B. And to date, they've backed some of the most disruptive startups in health, including LV, Big Health, Overture, Ori Biotech, and Quick Genius, making them the perfect partners for the podcast as we talk to CEOs at the cutting edge of the life science space, discussing their careers, the highs and lows, as well as taking a much closer look at the future plans for the businesses they're leading. For our first episode, I'm joined by Shardi Nahavandi, CEO and co-founder of Tuune, a medtech company backed by Octopus Ventures and founded in London, but with an approach to take on the global challenge faced by all women when it comes to contraceptives. We cover a number of topics with Shardi, including her personal journey and the events that lead to the founding of Tuune. It's super interesting. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Look forward to your comments. Hi, Shardi. Great to have you on the interview series. Really pleased to have you. I've been fortunate enough to work with you now for a short period, and I've given the audience a brief introduction. But can you, for them, introduce yourself and give them a brief highlight on where you come from, what you're doing at the moment?
Absolutely. Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So just for everyone else, I'm Shardi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tuune. Tuune is a personalized women's healthcare company, which fundamentally focuses on hormonal health. Our first product is personalized contraception, with a big focus on hormonal health and well-being.
Good. So we're going to go into the business as we get further on into the conversation, but drawing all the way back, and as someone that spends my day looking at LinkedIn profiles, your background is really interesting. You've gone from an architecture background into the science world. Definitely not what I'd typically expect to see. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and that leap from two different worlds?
Absolutely. So let me go back. So when I was I was an architect focusing on sustainable developments sort of around the world. After about 7 years in that industry, I realized that everything that we were building had the label of sustainability, but wasn't really sustainable. And to me, that wasn't resonating anymore. And the tech sort of world wasn't really caught up with the architecture, urban design world. And at that point, I was looking sort of to change my career path. My family actually owns a biomedical engineering company, looking at sort of genetic sequencing machines and sort of other sort of machinery related to biomedical engineering. And I was sort of getting more and more fascinated with that world. And so I decided to sort of change my career path and go down that route. And in order to do that, I started another master's at UCL in health tech and management to familiarize myself with the health and technology world a little bit more. And interestingly, while I was working and going through my degree, halfway through my degree, I started having severe health problems. I couldn't digest anything, literally anything. I couldn't even drink water, and I was going bald. Fortunately, I have hair now, so it's all good. And sort of after about seeing 10, 20 doctors, unfortunately, I got diagnosed with bowel cancer. Fortunately, that was a misdiagnosis. And all the doctors were saying, you're too stressed, you're working, studying, traveling, doing all of these things. Maybe you should do yoga and meditation. And I'm like, I can't digest anything. I'm going bald. Surely this can't be, the solution can't be, do yoga and meditation. And because I was doing sort of the degree that I was doing, I said, let me use this opportunity and write my dissertation on myself without telling anyone, and sort of also leverage the network that I had around me with work, and also having been to UCL sort of for my previous degrees. So I decided to, research cortisol and understand if it's really sort of causing me the symptoms that it's basically causing. And so I started researching. I even built a device that could measure cortisol levels on a daily basis, won an award for it at UCL, and turns out that, my cortisol levels were absolutely fine. The responses in the morning, in the afternoon and evening, all were absolutely normal. And in one of the research papers that I was going through, it linked sort of cortisol levels with female sex hormones.
Yeah.
And there was a world-renowned stress professor at the time, not to be named. So I went to him and I said, hey, I'm looking into this for my research. In your sort of studies, have you looked into the link between cortisol levels and female sex hormones? And he literally looked at me and said, we don't look at female hormones. They decrease statistical power. We only look at male subjects. And at this point, I'm like, oh my goodness, like you're not having this conversation with me. And he was like, I highly suggest you not going down this path because I don't think you're going to get a good grade. And this is sort of the most shocking conversation I had in my life.
So when you had that conversation, had you told people like your dad that you were doing this research? Was there anyone else that you were talking to going, right, yeah, look, this is my dissertation, this is what I'm doing it on. Do you think I'm crazy? Or was it, how many obstacles did you come across at least?
Yeah. So it was interesting because obviously the obstacles were, if you think about it, and if I was listening to my sort of, doctors, I shouldn't have even been doing the thing that I was doing. So obviously that was, when I look back, I think I was frozen for a week going, am I crazy? Like, what's wrong? What's happening? And sort of, I pulled myself up and I said, listen, you are going to find a solution for this. Like, we've been to the moon. Surely there is an answer for this, and I think those things have happened to me multiple times, and I'll go through and there are more to come in the story, but every time, you go back and say, there's always a solution. And so you can find something. And I think for me, that was the most important lesson, looking back and building what we are building right now. There are always obstacles. And so it's all the time picking yourself and going, okay, yes, we're gonna go through this, we're gonna get through this, and we're gonna find an answer. And yes, it's gonna be hard, but just keeping that optimism there, I think that's what enabled me to move forward. And for this story, I obviously finished my dissertation. There was quite a lot of findings that was pointing at female sex hormones. And because of that, I decided to enroll in a master's in endocrinology. And at that point, everyone absolutely thought I'm insane because they had no idea why I'm doing this. Also, they didn't know that I'm doing this because I literally was unable to function normally and properly on a daily basis. And so once I enrolled in that sort of course, I was hoping that once I get to the reproductive module, I'll have all the answers that I was looking for. But the interesting part for me was sort of the disconnect between medicine and science, and sort of this massive focus on deadly diseases. I'm not saying they're not important, they're extremely important, but there is definitely, you clearly see sort of this focus on sick care and deadly diseases related to that, other than, okay, what are the root causes of thing and how can we sort of understand what's going on and investigate. And so I had to go back to the research papers. Honestly felt like I read hundreds of thousands of research papers. Finally stumbled upon 200 papers that were suggesting that I have a particular hormone imbalance that impacts the way that I metabolize things. But because I didn't fall into what the medical world wanted to categorize me as, which was obese, diabetic, so on and so forth, they actually couldn't figure out what's going on. And so there was a drug that was not mainstream at the time that was suggested in these studies that I should take. So very optimistically, I went to my GP and I said, hey, these are all the tests that I've done. This is the drug. These are the data. And she literally spit in my face and said, who the hell do you think you are coming up with all of these things? Of course, we're not going to prescribe any of these things to you. Of course, we're not going to what are these tests anyways? And so sort of I got sent back, and luckily I reached out to one of the professors in one of those papers that I read, who was based in Germany, and I said, listen, like, these are, my findings, and I believe I really should be taking this medication. And he kindly sort of accepted and prescribed the medication to me. And very interestingly, in the UK, that drug became mainstream. So now my GP prescribes it, and here we are. But that sort of journey, I guess, led me to build Tuune. Why are we sort of, it felt to me, going through that as a patient and understanding and going through sort of the medical system and also the education system, around medicine and science, it really felt like I was going through the dark ages. And but the interesting part is all the ingredients are there for us to get out of those dark ages, but no one's doing anything about it.
I love that reality that medicine, I think, probably, and this acceptance that not substandard care in terms of contraceptive, but it's got to that stage in terms of where we've evolved technology wise, but from probably a public mindset is great. We've got these products that up until the 60s, 70s weren't really accessible or available on a wide scale use, and now they're still deemed as probably a degree of, these are novel, these are new, these are part of our generation, rather than looking at it and saying, well, actually, over the course of the last 60, 70 years, we've come such a long way. There's such a long way to, taking that technology and applying it back to the reality of these products were suitable then, they're not great now.
Exactly. I think you're spot on. That's they were super innovative, 6, 7 years ago, and kudos, for creating them in the first place, because they gave women the opportunity to be able to go out. But at the time that they were created, they were only focusing on preventing pregnancy, not actually the other impacts of what is it doing to a woman's body. What are they doing to, their physical body, their mental health, all of those things, right? And now we have the technology to actually understand those things. So why not do them? That's the question that we are, answering.
Just coming back to some of the pieces you mentioned there, and I loved it in terms of that base thought process that when you come up against a barrier, an obstacle, almost in your mind you go, we've been to the moon, therefore this is achievable. I've just got to find my solution. Is that a trait that's built in? Is that something you've learned from family? Is that just, coming up against personal circumstances like these where you've had constant barriers and the mission and the goal is enough of the driver to force your way through them every time? What's made you that way?
I think, very interestingly, I've been put in, so I had indirectly very interesting role models, very indirectly. So family members that I've seen, every time you ask them a question, they're like, why do you even think of it negatively? Like, why should you think of it negatively? So I was reinforced, every time that a negative thought comes or a negative sort of emotion comes, you go, but that person thinks about it differently. So why shouldn't I? So I was semi-exposed to that. It wasn't in my sort of, my father, for example, doesn't have that trait as much, but I have uncles who have very, very, very strong sort of, positive belief systems. Like, why shouldn't this be, like, why shouldn't this happen? Like, it's not even a question. Like, why do you even question it? So I think I was exposed to that. And very interestingly, I had also relationships in the past where, so my an ex had gone through cancer at the age of 18, and again shared the experience with me. And I said, oh, there is a different way of even dealing with cancer. So I think those behaviors got reinforced in me. And then also on the other side, the other driver for me is, like, I genuinely have allergic reaction to injustice, and I see this as a huge one. So those two drivers, I guess, in this particular case came together, and that's what drives me to do what we do on a daily basis.
Okay. And was there a natural transition point that you said, right, that's it, I've had enough of this, I'm going to do it myself, and we're going to change the way the game's played. We're going to set it up, and I think it is a very novel idea, the way you've come about looking at it and attacking it. Was there a specific point in time, a date where you went, actually, here's I'm going to start scratching out a business plan? Or is there or has it come over a long period of time that you've reached the choice to set up a business and build a company?
So I think I always wanted to make an impact, on humanity and make the world sort of a better place. That's sort of, I constantly think of like, why do we have money, for example? Like, was there a better way that we could have, built the world? So I always had those questions, and I'm always looking for something that I can sort of just dedicate myself to. And so that was, always in the back of my mind. So it wasn't something that I wasn't surprised that I started this, but let's say I was surprised that I picked this particular thing coming from architecture, right? Like I always knew I'm going to do something, but I never thought of it to be this.
Okay. No, I love that journey, and I think there's some really powerful pieces there in terms of that core trait and mentality, and the way journeys can either, but all the tough personal experiences can either build you up or they can knock you down. And if you can take the best from it, they really do power you on, which is great. So winding back on that story then, and looking at the remarkable shift from architecture into life sciences as a whole. How have you found that, in particular, that move and that transition, the challenges, the different environments, the different business mentalities, and it sounds, tell me, how have you found that shift?
Definitely significantly, obviously different. But I think in some ways, not so different in a way, because architecture was a space that it wasn't allowing any outside sort of creativity or technology to come in, and it really is ripe for that. Same with medicine, right? Like there are this sort of gates, medicine science, there's this gates that it's sort of difficult to pass through to really be able to look and innovate. And I think both of them, actually, if you think about it, could use the same approach, which, I mean, in my head, everything needs to be consumerized, not in a commercial way, but in terms of, we call it consumer health, right? I fundamentally believe that we are going to move towards a more consumer health sort of society, rather than us being so far away from our health. Same with architecture, same with urban design. These are cities and houses that we're going to be living. We are the end users. We are the end customers. Why don't we have a say in sort of what is being built and what is being done? Same with medicine. We are the ones who are using it. Shouldn't there be a direct feedback loop between us? And surely we understand our bodies more, and surely we understand what's going on. So, moving towards that consumerism, or making sure that everything is user-centric, I think could be applicable to both of those, architecture and medicine. Sounds strange, but that's how I see it.
And I think to your point, then, they are for both, and particularly the issues that you're coming up against. These are broad scale, mass, global issues. This is in terms of contraception, that's 50% of the world's population, thereabout. And there was something that I read on the website about the percentage of people with side effects that was, for me, incredibly alarming. I'm in a household with 3 women, and the reality is 2 out of 3 of them will probably have some form of side effect for taking a contraceptive. And the fact that we haven't put the power back into the consumer to go, right, I'm picking the right product for me, I think it's pivotal. And across the board, like you say, there will be a massive shift in industries because of us empowering ourselves with more knowledge and getting better access to that knowledge to make those decisions. Because I think if you wound back 20 years ago, a lot of what you've gone through in many ways wouldn't be possible. You've got to take what you've been told for gospel and accept it and move on, which is scary. I think quite alarming. So into the business then. So Peter Fish, how did the two of you meet? Is there any connection to sort of an entrepreneur's first? How is that starting point where you go, right, I've got this idea, let's turn it into reality. You're the right person to do it with me.
We actually met in a probably the geekiest place of all. We met at a precision medicine briefing event at Innovate UK. That's where we met, and sort of I had the idea in my head, I knew who I need. I was looking for it, but I always knew what sort of kind of a profile I'm looking for. And who would be right for the job, right? It couldn't be it needed to be someone who's both a scientist and a medical doctor who understands, how do you essentially bring those two disciplines together. And that's where we met. And the first thing he said, wow, I never ever thought, whenever I was consulting patients, especially females, that I should be considering hormones as a vital part of my diagnosis or my analysis, and so on and so forth. And in medical school, there was no such thing as, okay, female hormones actually impact women completely different to men, and you need to be doing different things. And sort of he works in the precision, he worked previously in the precision oncology space. And for him was, again, very much shocking that even in that, the importance wasn't raised as much. And we just clicked, and here we are.
Okay. And so for day one, setting up the business, was there a long lead time into this thought process, or was it just, right, I've got this idea, let's go for it, let's push on, start a business tomorrow? How much business planning went into the thought process before you went, right, stop the education pieces, let's focus on the day job, and the day job is Tuune? What was that transition point for you?
So for me, the transition part was very quickly. So Peter initially joined for the first 6 months part-time. And so we were figuring out sort of how all the dynamics works. How are we going to set up the team? What do we need? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? So on and so forth. And then I think 6 months in, we were like, okay, yes, let's sort of properly do this. And I sort of invested into the business. He invested into the business, and we sort of bootstrapped the business. And then we did sort of a big funding round a year later. But we heavily bootstrapped and constantly thinking about the business plan. How does the business works, financial models, all of those things. We spent a lot of time strategizing. How are we going to deliver this?
Okay, great. And one of the things, having got to know the business to a degree over the last 3 months, that's really impressed me, the culture and the dynamic that you've been able to build. If you were to ask a member of your team and people within the business, how do you think they'd describe the company, the way it operates?
I would say, a few different things. I would definitely say, and I can go into it in more detail, for us, mindset is above skill set. So I think that's probably one thing that will come across quite significantly. And by that, what I mean is, building the right team with the right mindset. Even if you pivot like a million times, hopefully you won't pivot a million times, but you're still going to win, and you're still going to be successful because you've built a team that are willing and able to tackle any problems, right? And if you think about startups are about literally on a minute basis dealing with issues and problems, literally on a minute basis. So you need individuals who look at problems as opportunities, and how do you create unfair advantages? Almost thinking of ourselves, I mean, it's a bit of a weird analogy, but almost thinking of ourselves as a recycling plant. You get garbage in, and you sort of get out, good things back to the society, things that are valuable and useful. And so, having that mindset, again, coming back to, going to the moon or building a plane, like looking back at history, these things were absolutely unachievable. I mean, thinking about it right now, it's still, how the hell did we go on the moon or Mars? Like literally, how did we do it? These are unachievable goals. And in my opinion, there are 3 main characteristics. And obviously I'm oversimplifying, but optimism, persistent, and looking outside the box. And you have those 3 ingredients, you are going to make it work. So I think that's what comes. I think everyone on the team will sort of agree on that side. And so even like giving an example and working with you, Nick, I know that I haven't been the easiest with all the requirements, but I've for example, we had this discussion previously around, I was saying, for the head of science and innovation role, we want someone, more towards a biohacker mindset. Not that we want people to come and biohack things and do crazy things, but having this mindset of how do you deeply understand the problem and how do you come up with multiple different solutions for it? Because there is no one perfect answer. Yeah. Right. But it's about how do you, and the key is that deep understanding of the problem and coming up with multiple solutions. So that's what we really try to look for as a team that we build, right? It's not going to be difficult, but you don't grow if you don't do difficult things. So that is sort of I would say number one thing that everyone in the company would agree on would be mindset. And then sort of digging a little bit deeper, I think for us, vulnerability is another sort of important cultural aspect that we want to honor. And by vulnerability, we fundamentally believe that to be courageous, you have to be vulnerable and open. You have to be comfortable with making mistakes. You have to be humble. You have to learn, and we're going to fail, and we're going to be okay, and we're going to get up, and we're going to do it again. And so, having that, I think, crucial again to supplement it with persistence and optimism and thinking outside the box. The other one is obviously a bigger appetite for risk. Again, true courage comes when you decide to take risks without knowing the outcome. Right. So again, we come back to the same theme. And, to get a little bit more technical, we are extremely also data driven and experimental. Like everything is about experimentation. Everything is about collecting as much data as we can to be able to make the right decisions, right? Nothing is top down, nothing is bottom up. Everything is how do we collect unbiased data? How do we run as many experiments as we can so that we see how we're learning and moving forward. And then landing on learning, we fundamentally see ourselves as a learning brand, externally and internally. Externally, I mean, this space, there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of misinformation. How do we help women and medical professionals out there to increase their knowledge about this space, to increase their knowledge about hormone health? And really, so I give you an example here. I don't know if you've heard of a platform called Seed Legals. They are democratizing access to legal documents. And when you read their legal documents, honestly, it's the easiest thing I've ever read in my life, versus if I read other legal sort of documentations, I literally feel like I'm reading Chinese. I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying here. And so how do we actually position ourselves in a way that we make everything digestible? And coming back to that user centricity, you need to make things digestible. If you don't put the power back into the hand of the users, then, I mean, I don't love the word user either. We're constantly thinking about, other words. I don't like patient either, so haven't found the perfect name, but for now, we're going to go with one of those two. And coming back to learning, internally, we're a learning brand as well, because we have a huge mission. We have a huge mission, and we know that in order to fulfill that mission, we need to be growing, and we need to be growing every day, and we need to be growing as human beings. So how do we do that? How do we in the company allow that to happen? If someone wants to learn Chinese or German or whatever, these things will contribute to your overall learning, and therefore you become a better version of yourself. And by becoming a better version of yourself, you are going to be a better version of yourself at work, and therefore contributing to the overall mission.
Good. So I think there's and that learning piece I've loved, because actually we translated some of those mentalities into how we operate on our side and behaviors, and this thought that that your personal learning is so heavily tied to your professional learning. And actually, if you build your purpose, your mission, your values, and your goals into what you're trying to achieve, if you're achieving personally and professionally, you're far happier professionally and personally, and you're going in the direction you want to take. For the business you've got, and what I often see as I think a unique challenge for the last 10 years is this blend between scientific and technology, and bringing together what the two sectors probably have in terms of what's atypical, what you'd expect to see in a biotech versus what you'd expect to see in a startup tech business, central London, and even I imagine the candidate pools, for example, dress very differently for interviews. Even that on a very basic spectrum, there are big differences. How do you go about pulling two groups of individuals together well, and then again to communicating that out to a customer who isn't a tech expert, isn't a scientific expert, needs the information in black and white and very clearly so they can digest it, take it away and make the right decision for themselves. How are you trying to pull this melting pot together?
Absolutely. So let me start with the second question, which was how do we actually translate that? So again, coming back to user centricity, we constantly have user engagement. We're constantly sitting in front of our sort of users going, do you understand this? And again, coming back to the fact, I think just you be user centric and the information comes. If it's not clear to them, if you are getting that feedback, if they don't understand it, you haven't done your job right. And so you just go back and iterate and iterate and iterate. You get to a place like See Legals where you read the legal documents and you're like, oh my God, this is just amazing. So I think, never lose that close feedback loop would be my answer. And I think that will guide us towards the right and direction. And regardless of if you're a medical doctor, if you're a scientist or engineer, or a product person or a designer, you can't argue with that. Everyone will then, there is no, oh my God, because I'm a doctor and I've dealt with patients, and therefore I know what they want. Those questions go out of the window. Or no, I'm an engineer. I know how an app should operate and where the button goes. That goes out of the picture. No one knows anything. We're here to learn from the user and sort of take things forward. And then on the other side of how do you sort of connect the tech and sort of the health side of things, again, I think, which hasn't been easy, by the way, but comes back to mindset. We're hiring for mindset, regardless of your skill set. And so if you have the right mindset, you'll quickly blend in and you'll just dive into understanding the problems and finding creative ways of solving that solution, regardless of your background, right? And so that's, I think, that would be and it's in no way, shape, or form an easy task to do, but I think if we get that right, then everything else will fall into place.
Okay. And I completely agree with you. I'm a big believer in mindset over skill set. Hands down, skill set can be taught. Mindset and evolving someone's mindset is a journey, and there's a timeline to that you just can't accelerate. People have to go through experiences to shift their mindset and change the way they look at the world, and go through those landmarks that allow you to evolve for an environment correctly. Whereas skill set, if you hire the right things, the rate and acceleration that people can take information on board and change what they're doing is so much easier. You mentioned earlier in terms of challenges, startup life is littered with them and sort of moments that you've probably gone and pulled hair out. Where would you say the biggest learning curve for you through the challenges that you face, the biggest piece that you've sort of taken away through the last 2-3 years of startup life?
Biggest challenge. Interestingly, I would say biggest challenge, because to begin with, it's not like I had the right mindset. I had to build the right mindset for this space, right? And again, understanding, I think what was the biggest challenge was really understanding that in order to make this successful, this hybrid of technology, health, design, a bunch of these different things, you need to understand what language the other people are talking about. What language do medical doctors talk? What language do engineers talk? What language do product people talk, right? And so translating that, not only translating that, but adding that layer of mindset, because if you add that layer of mindset, then you don't need to translate as much. And so I think that was the biggest learning, that we should have done that from the very beginning. We didn't. And there were a few instances that we had to part ways, or because we just didn't stick to that from day one. And I think that was one of the learnings. And the other learning, honestly, like, even if you're getting data and if you're data driven, really make sure that data is not biased, because you would think that we have data, but actually if you don't even dig into that data may be misleading as well.
Okay. And with that barrier, and you must have seen this even in the window that Tuune has been around, was that the the global outlook, the national outlook on femtech has changed, or is changing. It's definitely changing. Are you finding that you're still getting the same barriers that you had when you were going to people as an individual that had reports and science to go, right, GP, listen to me, I've got this information? Are you coming across the same barriers, or do you feel like the environment, I think the industry is definitely changing? Do you think the national?
No, for sure. I think so. I think starting here 3 years ago, I think if I were to give you a percentage, I would say 20% got what we're doing and 80% were like, what the hell, there's no problem here, what are you doing? Or just this doesn't make any sense to us. I think that's now 50-50, but we still have those people who are like, what, nothing's wrong, my patients are perfectly happy, what are you talking about, kind of a scenario. But definitely, I mean, I loved Matt Hancock's letter. I don't know if you saw it on Innovate UK. Phenomenal women's call, sort of, what was it, call for evidence. And oh my goodness, I was saying, what an honor and privilege to live in a country whereby it's so, like, I literally get tears in my eyes because it's just phenomenal that it's just so yeah, I just literally, like, it's just so amazing that they think of these things so advanced and so ahead of everyone else. It's just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. I just find that no other country is doing that if you look at it. So I just think we live in a really, really great era where we can actually do things. Technology, there is not a lot of maybe there is, and that's why miracles happen throughout history. But now we not only have the technology, but we have a positive force from the society moving us towards the right direction, right? So yeah, no, I think there's definitely massive change.
Good. And with that point on the UK, so the UK, I think from not my secondhand experience and the stories my partner's told, friends that I have, the problem, I think, acutely aware of the challenge that a GP has in attempting to prescribe for patients by being stuck to what the textbook says instead of looking at the reality of the individual and personalizing what they're doing. Do you think in other countries the issue is much the same? Do you think that it's less of an issue in other countries, or does it just gradually get worse?
I think it's pretty similar in other countries as well. It's very much universal, to be honest, because again, it first of all comes from the educational level and sort of universities. It just doesn't exist as a sort of module or anything to look at. So therefore, it doesn't trickle down. And then again, even not thinking about women's health, right? And women's health, in a way, hormonal health could be sort of categorized as a portion of it chronic health, right? Because it goes on for an average of 7-8 years if you have any sort of hormone related problems. And I think in general, our infrastructures, medical infrastructures, are just not yet built to deal with chronic disorders or diseases. They're very much on the firefighting side of things, right? Which, they did great, I think, in COVID, for example. Or they're great in dealing with cancers and so on and so forth, but we just haven't had the shift. And that is, I think, across the board. And then obviously looking at women's health, which everyone considers as niche and with a lot of stigma, it just amplifies the problem further.
Okay. And should I take it as the view that the ambition for the business is very much to be international, but this is
Absolutely
put in the hands of everyone?
Absolutely. We are currently in the UK, but very shortly we'll be in a few other locations, which we're planning on announcing sort of in the next few weeks.
Okay, great. And an overall vision for the company then, and your hopes of where you could take this to in the years to come. If you were painting your picture sort of 5-10 years down the line, what are the things that you would have hoped to have achieved, the areas that you hope to challenge and look towards?
So I think really, if I were to, and it's a slippery slope that I'm giving an example here. So I'm definitely not looking to get into the politics of things, but you look at COVID and you look at the clinical trials and you look at the data, and 94% of the trials were done on white men,
Okay.
And, again, I'm not going to get political about COVID or anything like that. It's not about COVID itself. Just want to make that crystal clear. But how do we in 5 years' time get to a place where at least that becomes 50-50, 50% on men, 50% on women, or, let's call it 60-40. Actually, I'll be happy with that. But how can we get to a place whereby we're actually developing drugs, and treatments that are based on female physiology as well as male physiology? I'm not saying I'm against men. My co-founder is a man. I'm not a man hater. But how do we get to a place where it becomes more fair and balanced?
Do you think dare I ask a political question, but is there an overarching reason that pharma companies are avoiding essentially the female demographic in clinical studies as it stands?
I think it's just a question of technology, to be honest. Technology, and they're just not used to it, right? And so this is the right time whereby we can evaluate things. One of the fundamental things that that stress professor told me as well, he was like, the fluctuations decreases our statistical power. Fair point, but I think the reason why no one thought of coming up with something earlier was because of all the stigma that existed around it, right? Period, cycles, all of those things. But right now we have the technology.
Okay.
Statistical power with computers are not going to be a problem anymore.
Is there an argument that the likes of the FDA should be looking into this and putting it into requirements for clinical trials and looking after, you're approving a product or products that have both genders in mind when you administer a product? Surely it should be something that they should be aware of. Is there much noise? Is there anything coming out of these regulatory bodies to have it on their agenda?
That's a very good point. I don't think so. And I think the way that they sort of, take the responsibility off their shoulders are like, well, if a woman is pregnant, then there are far more implications if we give a drug. So it's best to sort of not look into that, which is a very, very valid argument and easily puts you off. And you're like, oh yeah, of course we're not going to touch pregnant women. So I think they have a valid answer, but I don't think they have been pushed enough. And so hopefully, governments like the UK government with Matt Hancock that has put something out there like that would also drive those conversations, and we'll get to a point where we actually would demand, and I think we're definitely going there. We would demand for a higher quality care.
Okay. And that transition, do you think it's a reality over the next 10 years to head towards that 50-50 landmark, or do you think do you think we're talking much longer than that to see that radical shift in the way that we do that medicine behaves for people and consumers?
I think it should definitely happen within the next 5 years, not 10 years. So I think there's going to be a lot of movement in the space pushing for that. So I don't think anyone can afford not to do it at this point anymore.
Okay. Good answer. Okay. Building out the future then for the business, and you've touched on some of the vision points. Are there short-term landmarks that you want to discuss at all? Is there anything that we should, anything you're looking to bring into the business? Anyone that you'd like to hear from that would be helpful for you and the journey of the company over the next 12 months?
In terms of hiring?
Yeah, combination of hiring, advisors, the things that would be important to the business.
So I think, yeah. So I mean, just to go back, we've started with contraception, but we are very quickly coming out of contraception. So we would be looking to significantly expand beyond contraception into sort of how do women's bodies actually operate, and what does it mean to be a woman, and therefore the medications and everything else that would go around that. We would, be looking to expand our team significantly. Going for a rapid growth. and looking to hire those sort of, like-minded individuals who like the kind of mindset that we would like to practice. Same with advisors. I think it honestly goes both ways, and we were super lucky to have our chief medical advisor. He is phenomenal in the way that he thinks, very much sort of your non-conventional consultant gynecologist who thinks outside the box.
Okay, great. I think we discussed this, of course, before previously, but London's the base for the business. But there's just a serious international mentality to the way you recruited, but also the business as a whole. And we've always talked about taking on people outside of the UK, looking at mainland Europe, looking at the US, and going as far afield as possible, because I think that mindset, you want that particular energy, is unique, and I think there's not that many people with that approach. I think you mentioned US slightly earlier. Is the plan to have a satellite hub in the US? Are you looking to grow physically in any other country at the moment?
Well, to be honest, we're constantly evaluating this, and because we are sort of a very scalable platform, we can easily operate in multiple geographies, and that's what we're evaluating right now. But from a hiring perspective, we've said, especially given COVID, I think every single person that pretty much, quite rightly, that we've spoken about, they want flexibility, right? And they want to go and work somewhere else remotely. And again, coming back to, interestingly, what do that user wants, if you consider them a user as part of, the hiring process, because essentially you're asking them what they want. And so thinking about the needs of individuals who are looking for different roles, I think it would be foolish not to think about that we have to rethink hiring and locations. And so the reason why we're open is because a lot of good quality candidates and talents are actually relocating from the UK to better, sort of more sunny locations. And not better, but more sunny locations, let's put it that way. And so, what do? You compromise the talent because it's not in the same location. I personally don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think, having a more flexible approach, again, offering these people the autonomy to what they do in the location that they are, comfortable, will give you much better outcomes than being like, no, we're only going to hire in the UK, and if you're not here, then no, bye.
Okay. And has that mentality and that thought process for you, if you were pre-COVID, has that shifted? Has that evolved?
100%, actually 180% shifted. I was pretty much against remote working. That's where I was. And honestly, seeing how much more productive you can be during COVID and lockdown and working from home, if obviously you plan everything and you project manage effectively, the outcomes can be just much more significant than going to the office. So for me, it was a massive change in sort of the way that I was looking at things, basically.
Okay, good. And it's been a massive shift in industry and for everyone. I think for myself, I was doing the stupid commute. I was sort of 4 hours on a train to get to the office and back again. And that evolution and refining that time and translating it into productivity and results and impact, both from a professional and personal life, has just been enormous. And I think there is the real challenge that I haven't got my head around is how do you bring graduates into a business? How do you train people that don't have experience? How do you and I think for any good business, it shouldn't just be for a top layer of experienced individuals to take that experience and move on. There should be young people coming through that get to experience the mentality and this drive that early stage companies have, because you just learn at a rate and pace that is almost unmatchable because of the different challenges companies go through. Are you thinking about bringing in junior people? Have you given any thought?
We actually have interns right now working remotely. And I mean, the one that we have is phenomenal. So I don't know if it's because she's phenomenal or we were phenomenal. I don't know the answer to that question. But But we didn't let it stop us from sort of bringing on board interns. And the way that we got around it is, so at that particular team, they actually have their Zooms open for like 4 or 5 hours a day. Like they're literally as if they were sitting next to each other in the office.
Okay. So still very much almost an office environment with them.
Correct. Almost an office environment, but online.
Okay, great. No, it's brilliant. Something that we still haven't got our heads around, and I think that's because you wouldn't like to spend 2-3 hours listening to me on the telephone outside of a Zoom call. Okay, so look, it's been great to talk to you, Shardi. Great to get an understanding of the business and the journey ahead. It sounds incredibly exciting. I'm delighted to be partnering and supporting the business on its journey. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Is there a preferred contact method? LinkedIn, website? How would you like?
LinkedIn would be best. Yeah, definitely LinkedIn would be best. So they can just reach out on LinkedIn to me. I'm happy to have a conversation with them.
Okay, brilliant, perfect. Well, look, thank you very much for your time. Have a great rest of your week and good luck with Tuune.
Thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye bye.